The story begins in the mid-1950s, in a quiet corner of Los Angeles, where the neon hum of a city on the brink of rock and roll fame barely reached the small houses of Pacoima. A 16-year-old boy, Richie Valens, strummed a guitar, his fingers clumsy but determined. It was in those small, sunlit rooms that the spark of genius first flickered. But genius alone, the world would soon show, could be both a gift and a chain. Richie's life was moving fast. One moment, he was a teenager in high school, performing at local talent shows. The next, he was signing with Delphi Records, a fledgling label run by Bob Keane, a man who knew the music business's hunger all too well. Keane was a survivor, a hustler with ambition that exceeded his modest means. And in Richie, he saw something that could change everything. From the moment Richie recorded "Come On, Let's Go," the world began to notice. The single wasn't just a local sensation, it was a signal flare. It announced a new kind of rock and roll, a fusion of Latino rhythms with the explosive energy of American teen culture. But with this attention came eyes from the outside, the powerful, well-resourced forces of the major labels. It wasn't just fame that drew the majors, it was potential. Richie Valens represented a bridge between communities, between cultures, and most importantly, between small, vulnerable labels and the titans of the industry. To men like the executives at Columbia and RCA, companies that would eventually fall under the Sony umbrella, Richie was not just a musician. He was a commodity, a piece of market strategy wrapped in a 16-year-old body. Bob Keane understood this better than anyone. He knew he couldn't match the promotional budgets of the big labels, couldn't guarantee nationwide distribution, couldn't promise the national radio play or movie appearances that the majors could offer. And yet, he was holding the keys, the masters, the contracts, the very lifeblood of Richie's recordings in his hands. Here lies the first tension, the first dark question that historians, fans, and conspiracy theorists have asked for decades. If Keane feared losing Richie to a bigger label, was it possible that he could have been tempted to safeguard his control by extreme means? The archives, interviews, and surviving correspondence show no evidence of foul play. But the music industry then, as now, was built on control, ownership, and fear, and those were enough to cast long shadows over a young star's life. Richie's rise made Bob Keane's small label suddenly a player on a much larger field. Delphi was no longer just surviving, it was thriving, but the stability depended entirely on a single boy who could be swept away at any moment. Every phone call from Columbia, every proposal from RCA, intensified the tension. Keane had to make choices: protect his investment, keep Richie under his wing, or risk being swallowed by the corporate machine. And for a man like Keane, who had survived the ruthless music scene of post-war Los Angeles, the stakes were painfully clear. Richie was brilliant, but he was also human. He wanted more, as any young artist would: wider audiences, bigger stages, and the creative freedom to explore his music. He was bright enough to see that the majors offered a path to immortality, but naive enough to trust the adults around him, like Keane, to guide him safely. That trust, that dependence, created an invisible tension, the weight of potential exploitation and the heavy cost of ambition. As 1958 bled into 1959, Richie's fame intensified. Donna topped charts, Labamba crossed cultural boundaries, and teen magazines plastered his face across the nation. Every hit reinforced Delphi's place in the industry, but also reminded Keane that his lifeline, the boy who could bring the label to greatness, might slip through his fingers at any moment. And then came the plane. February 3rd, 1959. The night the music world lost a young prodigy. The plane crash that took Richie Valens, Buddy Holly, and the Big Bopper was officially blamed on poor weather and pilot error. But for those who lived in the shadowed corners of the music business, the tragedy exposed the industry's relentless hunger. The masters, the rights, the recordings, they didn't die with him. Delphi retained control. The boy who could have been the ticket to the big leagues was gone, but his music remained, frozen in time, owned, monetized, and controlled by the man who had discovered him. The aftermath was bittersweet. A real good question to ask is quite simple: did Bob Keane mourn genuinely? Because when it was all said and done, he profited, and the facts of the matter remain. He now possessed a catalog more valuable than he could have ever imagined. Richie's recordings became a posthumous treasure, circulating on jukeboxes, radio stations, and compilation albums. Each replay, each sale, each licensing agreement reminded the world that ownership in the music industry is both power and a haunting echo of control. And yet, we return to the question that lingers in every discussion about Richie Valens. If control is power, and power is the lifeblood of the music business, how far can it stretch before it becomes dark? Could fear of losing an artist ever outweigh the responsibility to protect him? Did the system itself, not any individual, create conditions where tragedy became inevitable? This chapter of Richie Valens' story is a cautionary tale, a window into a time when youth, talent, and ambition collided with a music industry that operated in shadows. The boy who changed rock and roll forever was also a symbol of the costs of ownership, control, and commerce. His music, vibrant, revolutionary, and eternal, is inseparable from the story of who controlled it, who profited from it, and who ultimately held the reins while the world watched a star rise and fall. By examining Delphi, Bob Keane, and the major labels circling Richie, we uncover not just the story of a boy and his music, but the dark undercurrents of an industry that has always thrived on owning the dreams of the young. And perhaps, in understanding that tension, we can better appreciate the courage it took for Richie to create, for Keane to survive, and for the music itself to endure. Because in the end, Richie Valens wasn't just a musician. He was a commodity, a lifeline, and a cautionary legend, and the masters he left behind tell a story just as haunting as the one he lived.